Welcome to another episode of Six Figure Secrets for Fractional Experts. My name is Bradley Jacobs. I'm your host. I'm joined today by Samantha Hartley. Samantha, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Bradley.
Absolutely. So Samantha comes to us with experience in international marketing at the Coca-Cola Company and many others. She's been on her own since 2000, so 24 years, and the last 7 years working with independent consultants and small agencies, helping them maximize their revenue. Fill in the rest of the details for us, Samantha.
Well, the thing that I think I specialize in is profitable and joyful consulting. So I'm very much about, like, one of the reasons I left corporate was because it wasn't fun anymore. And I feel like if we wanted to be miserable, we could all just go back to our corporate jobs. So if you're going to be self-employed, like, at least like have fun and make it the most enjoyable thing you've ever done in your entire life. So I work with consultants who are on the revenue roller coaster is one of the ways I refer to it, which, I think most of us know what that means. And a lot of times when people come to me, they're really slammed with business, but they want to grow and they can't imagine a way to grow because they're already as busy as they know how to be. And so what I help them to do is transition from one-offs, which is what a lot of agencies and independent consultants know how to do, or project work, to what I call transformational engagements, which is long-term work that is retainer-based and where you're able to go in and really, really make a difference with your client. And when you do that, the client experiences just like massive transformation. And you also have kind of like the security of that recurring revenue. So you're able to give your best. And then I think it also benefits like whoever is served by those clients because like they actually transform. So my clients tend to be like in leadership development or finance, and whoever they're working with, I know that they're making things better for those people. In a lot of my clients work in corporations that I don't want to go work in. I was in one, but they're working with those corporations. And I think they're making things better for that person who used to be me. So it's part of why I'm so passionate about working with B2B consultants and management consultants, is because they're changing lives in their own ways.
Some of our customers come to us and say, I have 3 clients at 5K a month or 3K a month, and I want to go from 15K a month to 50. Mm-hmm. What is the biggest mindset shift that needs to change for that individual?
So the first mindset shift is that you feel like you need to do that by going from 3,000 or 5,000. Like, how many $3,000 a month clients do I need to have to get to that number? And what's the target number again?
Let's say it's 50K a month.
Yeah. Could you have one client for 50K a month? So a lot of people are going to be like, no, I mean, okay, cool. Well, how about 2 at 25K? Well, maybe, but I don't know about that. Okay, so how about 4 at like 15, 10, 12 a month? So now we start to get into something that's like, you probably know people who are doing things for 12K a month, and maybe you've ever had something that was 12K a month. So this is the direction that we need to come from, is not like, how do I take what I'm doing and do more of that? It's like, how do I get to that number and work backwards into like, what could I do that would bring that kind of value to clients? And I have clients who have made like $700,000 a year, but $5,000 at a time. And I'm like, that is brutal, right? So what I'm wanting, and what I happen to be working with that client on, is let's make $700,000 with, 5 or 10 clients.
So, and then the next question always is, okay, well, how do I find those clients, right? Like, how do I get someone to pay me 12K when right now I'm charging 5?
Yeah. It is a question of it's marketing and messaging is like the short version of this. It's like you have to position yourself to be doing something different. And the thing that you're doing differently is that you're solving a different kind of problem. So if you're solving $3,000 a month problems, I mean, that's great, but you're usually working for someone for whom like $3,000 is a lot of money for them. And so who else do you know who like $10,000 isn't a lot of money for them? And for a lot of my clients, they're working in corporations, but my favorite target audiences are, 25 to 50 million. That kind of range is great. But even if that feels like that's completely out, 15 to 25 is a great target audience. The reason I love that kind of niche is because they're large enough that they are serious, but you're not lost in some like huge corporate bureaucracy. And so 15 to 25 there's probably businesses in your town that are $15 million businesses. And they're going to be things like manufacturers. They could be certain kinds of service businesses. So I love to go get clients in your local area. And so how do we find them? Well, you do things like check out the chamber or, figure out who they are. So all prospecting starts from like, well, what if I just got out the business journal of my local area and I went through and I found like, where's the range of clients who might be in this range. And I just make a list of them and I'm like, here's 50 of them. You can connect with them on LinkedIn or you can like do whatever, but like where in your town did these kind of people gather? Do they have an association that they belong to? Do their human resources people all belong to something? And then you work your way into them. But to me, it starts first with the intention of like, how do I find a client base that is at the right level? And can I solve problems for them that are $1 million in value? If you do anything related to people, every people problem is expensive, just is. So like if you make meetings shorter, that seems like a really small thing, but the time of the individuals in there, if you do the math on it, it starts to just add up like crazy. So if there's a problem of like turnover or hiring, all people problems are necessarily expensive. So I know this because I work with a lot of people in leadership development and human resources type of industries. Other areas, obviously, like finance, sales, all of those kind of areas are also going to make a big impact. So who has a problem that is $1 million problem that you could solve for them? You can easily charge $100,000 or more to solve that problem.
Do you think about it in percentage of the value that you bring? Like you just gave a 10% example. Is that about right?
It can be about right. But if I gave you $2 and you gave me $1 back, would that be a good deal? How long would you give me $1 in exchange for $2?
Forever.
Like for me, I would do that deal all day long. I might even do it for $1.25. So it doesn't have to be that, but it can be. I've seen plenty of things. I think in most offline, the internet marketing is all like 10x return, but most normal business owners are like, hey, 3 to 5 times return on their investment. They'd be pretty happy with that. So I think you can usually look at things like that. A time when you might have to consider it not necessarily being like 10%. I had a client who this was a large hospital network that she was working with, and the value that she was going to bring to them that we calculated was like saving them and earning them through efficiencies, like $35 million. So I was like, well, a good price for this would be something like $3.5 million. And she was like, no way. There's other people in her profession who would do that, including like the big 5 consulting firms who would do that for less than $3.5 million. And so that's why you might be like, well, what's a good number for this? So, somewhere between, I don't know, 500,000 and $3.5 million. And I think she ended up landing on $800,000. But, that's pricing is really art and science.
We're skipping a step here that is normal for us to talk about, but some people listening might not be so obvious to think about the value that we're creating and then quantifying that value. It sounds like you did that exercise with your client. A lot of our customers think about, well, how much time is it going to take me? Right. And we immediately try and pivot away from that. But I'm curious to just get your quick thoughts on time it takes versus value to the client and the mindset there.
So the time it takes us is a cost. And if you've been in business long enough, then you usually have an idea about how long certain things take you. And one of the ways, because I'll work with my clients on this about this too, women especially really feel the need to overgive. I don't know if that's a thing that you've found in your audience, but if someone's paying them like, I've gotten them to sell in $100,000 plus engagement. And now they're like, okay, well, someone's paying me all this money. I need to just give them all like so much value. And I'm like, that's not necessarily the case. Here's an example of why. One of my clients, she piled so much stuff into this program the year they worked with her that at the end of it, instead of renewing, which a lot of her clients did, they were like, we still haven't gotten through all of the stuff that you've given us. So they were like, we're not done with our dinner. We can't have any more food, and so it was really good for her. The next one of those that she sold in, we much dialed back like her desire to put in all that stuff. So one of the things I'll do with my clients for whom delivery is heavy is delegate more stuff to the actual client. They can do stuff themselves. I mean, it depends on what you do. Obviously, if you're doing some complicated something online that is your special skill that you know how to do, then it isn't necessarily the case that you can. But a lot of times, especially if you have a signature system, which means I have a way I do things, it's a step-by-step process, kind of like a recipe. Signature system, proprietary process. If I take that out of myself and I package it as a program, this is like e-courses and stuff like that. But especially in consulting, we can give that to the clients and we can take them through that training. But then at a certain point, they can take that and use that themselves. So you can do train the trainer internally, or you can empower the client to do more of the learning. In which case they kind of take on part of the delivery. And what's amazing about that is they then get better results. And I wasn't delighted to find that out in the beginning because I was like, oh, but I'm so valuable and whatever. And then I'd give it to them. So I first did this. I had a signature system and I had a client who was a community bank and I taught them how to do this stuff. And the part that I would normally write, the copywriting that I would normally do for my clients, they used like the tool that I gave them. And like their first pass was kind of like better than most agencies. No offense to agencies. I'm sure these agencies were much better, but this client wrote copy that was so good. I was like, okay, so it seems like I can teach the client to do certain things themselves. And then they will get like, that's a skill they have forever. They'll know how to do that. So you really can take it off of yourself and put more of it onto them. And that's just one example of the ways that I help the clients make delivery less onerous for them.
You mentioned a difference between men and women that you've seen. I've certainly seen differences as well, but I really want to hear it from your point of view. You work with a lot of women, and obviously I'm not qualified to speak on it. So tell me about the differences that you see, the biggest ones, the impacts that those things have, and for our female listeners, or even our male listeners that are having compassion or empathy or need to look out for their female counterparts. Like, what do you see?
So, I think there are men and women, and then there are women who have a lot of masculine qualities. You know, you can hear like I'm goal driven and I'm a getter doner and all of those kinds of things. So I have a lot of balanced masculine and feminine. And then there are men who are the same way. There are men who are like really compassionate and nurturing and creative and curious. And so I'm talking about energies in these things. A lot of times people who have a lot of feminine energy, they are so compassionate that and empathetic that they take on the feelings of the client. So they don't want to come across as salesy. They don't want to ask for things. So a lot of that, before they even do something, they've decided that they don't want to do that for the client because the client might be uncomfortable or things like that. So that's a big one. I don't want to make anybody feel uncomfortable. I don't want to come across as needy, a lot of those kinds of things. And I have clients that I've worked with who are men who have also expressed those same ideas. It's just that it can be very, much more pronounced in a lot of women that I work with. That desire to over deliver, because of, I think the core here is a sense of not enoughness or like that's so much money. Or like a lot of them will have issues around like, worth value of like, I wouldn't pay that much for this. That's a huge thing I'll have to reprogram. It's harder. The older women tend to have a lot more internalized misogyny. The older they are, younger generations, a lot of them are like, hey, I'm totally valuable. It should totally be this much, which is great because they're right. So, those tend to be the issues, and just a general ickiness factor around sales and putting themselves out there. Of course, there are men who are like also shy to put themselves out there, but that's why I say it's like sometimes it's more feminine and masculine than it is specifically men and women. But there are so often things that I can say to women, and the reason that a lot of the women who are attracted to working with me see that I'm not a squishy. I am empathetic and nurturing, but I'm also like very financially motivated. It's not my first motivator. I'm motivated to make a difference and bring meaning to my clients. But I will talk about money. I will talk about, getting things done, sales, asking for the sale. Sales is my favorite thing in all the world. I adore sales. And so any women who come to me who feel like, I'm not sure about that, I usually will convert them to also loving sales. So it's why I have like a lot of hope for, things can be different. I can make a big promise. The men who come to me are usually like, they know how to do it the regular way that they feel like everyone is doing it. And they're like, they would like to do it a way that isn't leading to so much burnout or doesn't have to take so much out of them.
And I really appreciate the distinction between masculine and feminine versus men and women. So I can definitely appreciate that. One of the things that I've seen is this kind of cautious attitudes. Like, I don't want to screw up, or I don't want to, rub someone the wrong way. And a lot of, let's say, the masculine trait, which are often men, but not, of course, not always, but the masculine trait is kind of like, screw it. I'll just go for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And when I think about my first client, that was my attitude. I was like, I'm just going to throw out this really big number. And if it doesn't work, okay. Right. That's fine. And
Yeah.
I got very close to that big number and it was life changing. Right. But I tell that to especially some women or some more feminine folks, and they're like, oh my God, how did you do that? Right. Like, and so I guess is there anything to add to that for like how people can think about more of the screw it, let me just give it a shot, because good things happen when you ask for them.
And if you don't, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take and all of that kind of stuff. One of the things that's really helpful for me is that when I was with the Coca-Cola company, I was at a meeting. I was very new at corporate, and I was taken, I was part of the group that traveled around the world, and we went to the Asian headquarters in Hong Kong. And I was to give this presentation of content that I had kind of just learned, so I didn't really know the material that well. My boss was in the meeting, the head of the Hong Kong division there. He was in the back of the room, and all of the younger staff people were kind of in the front of the room. And so I was delivering this information to them, and all of the people in the front of the room were like, this is so helpful. This is great. Yes, thank you. By their faces, I could really see that. And the guy in the back had his arms crossed, and he had like this finger gesture of like, move it along, move it along. I'm so smart. This is so whatever. And then my boss is sitting here beside me, and she's like, why are you going so fast? They want this. And I was like, can you see that? It was one of the most uncomfortable situations I ever had in my entire life. Now, it's not traumatic, it's not horrible, but I just remember like a really, really horrible feeling. I have that as a paradigm for like one of the hardest meetings I was ever in. So when I go into those pitch meetings of like, I think I'm just going to say it's going to be $10,000 a month, or I'm going to say it's $300,000. I just feel like this is by far not the biggest meeting of my life. It's like, I've been in that meeting. What's the worst thing that could happen? They laugh and point. I mean, really, like, what's so bad? So I think cultivating resilience of like, okay, they said no. So what was a no? I go on, I go to the next thing. That's the first thing I would say. The other thing I would say, and I think that a lot of people hesitate to put themselves out there, and because of that point and laugh reaction. And I'm like, think about your perfect clients. And I hope everyone has perfect clients, so they have a paradigm for this. I'm like, would your perfect client ever like like be mean to you or say negative things? Of course they wouldn't. So if I'm ever in a situation, whether it's a LinkedIn outreach message or a meeting or a networking situation, and somebody is like rude to my face, I'm like, not my client.
Yeah, makes it easy to walk away, right?
Totally.
I think that what's the worst that could happen exercises and actually writing it down, like sit in that experience of what it could be like. Because that really is the worst case, is that they call you crazy or they say no or they laugh at you. That really is the worst case.
Yeah.
And it's like, will you be okay? Right? Like, can you take that small ego hit that you got laughed at? It's like, yeah, it won't be fun, but we'll all be okay here. And then, we'll learn from it and move on. So I do find it a really helpful exercise. When you think about keeping your pipeline full, right? We're talking about a lot of strategies to ask for big numbers, mindsets, things like that. But I found it much more helpful to have an abundant pipeline. And then I could say no to that client, that potentially $300,000 client. It was okay because there were more down the pipeline. How do you think about, like, what are the strategies to actually make that a reality?
I think it's really important to be strategically visible. One of my things is strategic visibility. It's not omnipresence. It's not ubiquity. It is strategic visibility. And that is so much more manageable. So where is your perfect client, and what are they seeing, and what are they consuming? Or your referral partners. What are they seeing and consuming so that you're in front of your referral partners, your community, your own clients, and constantly being visible to them in ways that remind them, oh yeah, I could hire you. I could, oh, that's a great, that's a need we have. So that kind of thing will keep your pipeline full. Obviously, all of the tactics of like email list and those kinds of things. But I think the way that we support the email marketing and the funnels and the all of the things is by that visibility and thought leadership. And there's empathy in thought leadership, because it's like, what is of concern to my perfect client? What are they thinking about and working on? And how do I put those messages out? And being, the discipline is in making those offer posts, or having the outreach for the offers, or inviting them in to some hosted event so they can have an experience of you. I think those kinds of things are key. And I'm unapologetically spiritual in the sense that I'm like, communicate with the universe. What is your intention and what do you want the universe to know? And list that support so that you're actually making things happen that you want to have happen. And I have a client right now who is super new to this kind of stuff, is transitioning her audience, like had a packed pipeline full of wrong clients that she doesn't want to work with anymore. So she's been gradually turning her battleship. And the way some good new clients are trickling in, they're not as the transformational ones that we want to have yet, but the good new ones are trickling in. And the way we know that things are changing is because she has leads coming in and they're the right kind of client. It's project work right now, but it's finally the target audience is right. And so it's like, okay, we have like the overlap of the Venn diagram, right? Of like, perfect client, not quite the right project, not quite the right work, but that's coming together pretty soon.
When you think about, I'm a big fan of thought leadership as well. I think it can go a really long way, one to many kind of approach. What are the biggest differences in someone who's doing thought leadership online, maybe let's just say on LinkedIn, and not really getting a lot of engagement, or it's not really working for them, and someone who's doing it and their pipeline's full, that ideal client? Like what are the biggest differences?
I think the biggest difference is between the thought leadership is about what I want to talk about versus what they want to hear about. Mm-hmm. And there is a certain amount of really dumb seeming stuff, like formatting, but like there's empathy in formatting. I think probably everybody at one time or another has been in a LinkedIn pod and has had to go and look at 20 posts where you're like, oh, you're kidding me. All this reading, help me out, throw me a bone. If, we should be able to one thumb scroll that post twice and get the sense of it. That's empathy. That's like really putting myself in the shoes of the reader of this thing. So what do they want to read about? How much time do they have to be reading? How can I stop their scroll in the feed? And what can I teach them? And from time to time, and this is what performs really well for my clients, is almost every time they do a case study post, they'll get leads from it. So really spending time on what they want to hear, less than like, I want to talk about this and I want my peers or whoever to think I'm so smart about this. I think that's the big difference.
Yeah. And how do you know? This is a question I get a lot. It's like, how do you know what your clients are struggling with? Well, it's a chicken and egg thing to some degree, right? Because I'm like using the thought leadership content to get on the phone. Yeah. And yet in the thought leadership content, I need to hit on what's troubling them, and then they'll mm-hmm. Yeah. So how do I think about that?
I mean, it's really, to me, like the documentary model. There's like Nanook of the North is this this Inuit man with a family in Alaska in the 1920s, and we watch this little documentary, and yet there's like something that was like, I take away a meaning. I was like, it really meant something to me about blah blah. Really, in that insane level of specificity, which is an avatar, you can be universal. So I'm very much like. How do you get that person on the phone? How can you be connected to them? So when somebody says, I want to really get into a new target audience, how do I do that? I'm like, write an article or, Bradley, do a podcast series where you are like, hey, I'm bringing on experts in XYZ niche, and I'd love to talk to you about, because you're a leader in the yada yada, and find out how many of them will say yes to you. And you have those conversations. Well, isn't that dishonest because it's just a ruse to get a conversation with them? You don't have to sell to them. It's a ruse to find out more about exactly what you just said, which is, I want to hear from leaders in this industry. So, for example, if my clients are working with, these Fortune 100 companies, I can talk to my clients who are there, or I can bring in Fortune 100 companies and be like, you guys hire consultants. What are you looking for? And then I'm offering something that's useful for them. If I'm looking for management consultants who are doing, who have $5 million businesses as opposed to $500,000 businesses, I ask around in my network and I say, who do you know? I'm looking to interview. I'm looking to, it's a listening tour like politicians do. Just go and learn about them. Where do they gather? What do they read? I was just talking about this example today. It's another Coca-Cola example, but no matter who you are at Coca, no matter how old or young you are, you're not a teenager working for that company. And so you aren't actually the target audience. And I think this is really important for all of us, because even though you're a consultant or you're an agency owner and your clients are that too, we're still not quite them in many ways. And so I can only be so self-referential and assumptive about certain things. So go and talk to them. And what we would do at Coke is I would go to a grocery store and I would shadow this woman in Korea, was shopping for her family in the morning. And I just chill, but follow her around the grocery store, and I'd notice what she bought and I'd notice what sizes and blah, blah, blah. And then we would learn about what do moms in Korea, what are their consumption behaviors relative to Coca-Cola. You can do the same thing with your audience. Gets up in the morning, opens up LinkedIn, or is dude, never. One of my clients went to she's a part of an association, like a trade, for her profession. She went to the association meeting, and there was the young and up and coming leaders of her organization there. And they were all like, for the love of God, don't make us get on LinkedIn. We hate it. Please go to Instagram. And so she came back with oh my God, I just realized. And I'm like, there you go. So if we don't make assumptions about our target audience and we're curious and empathetic, who are they and what do they want to know?
So many of these fractionals, right? They're independent. You're on your own. You're servicing your clients. You have to do your books and invoicing and project management and on down the line. And I hear it all the time. I don't have time for this. I don't have time for marketing and sales. What's your message to those folks that are really struggling to find time for marketing and sales?
The bad news is that's the business you're in. If we full-time do sales and marketing, then the prize is we get to spend some of our time doing the thing that we actually love to do. So that's the paradigm shift of self-employment. And I'm not, I didn't invent that idea. That's from the E-Myth. It's not about you start your pie shop because you love to bake, and then you bake pies for a living. Suddenly you have hiring and supply chain and all this other nonsense. So that's the truth about being self-employed, is that most of what you're doing is sales and marketing. I have some clients, I'm always hesitant to say, who do literally no sales or marketing. I mean, they do sales because they enroll clients, but they have just a constant flow of leads. So that is because at the beginning they did this and they established a referral base, and now they sit back and constant flow of leads coming into the business, and they don't have to do any more any more marketing. The only thing they have to do is easy sales calls with people who are pretty much either told to work with them literally or pre-sold on them, and then they enroll them. So that's utopia. That's the end of where you're trying to get to. And in the beginning, what you have to do is you have to put in the reps. You just have to go and do the things that you're supposed to do. I don't have time to do that. Okay, then you'll always be on the revenue roller coaster and you'll always be trapped. So take the clients that you have, on the next ones, charge more. On these ones that you have here, work on getting delivery more efficient so that you're not spending so much time with them, and you begin to open up time for you.
As far as that initial, let's say, few years, right? Because it's not a quick thing. You talk about building this referral network and getting to that place that's utopia. That's not easy. What are the activities? Let's just say I have an hour and a half a week. That's what I'm willing to put into sales and marketing, right or wrong. what should I be doing in that hour and a half per week that's going to eventually get me to utopia?
Mm-hmm. So you have a couple of choices, and it's going to depend on uh, what is. I talk about working in our joy and genius zone. So genius is like stuff that you're great at, and joy is stuff that gives you energy as you do it. So if you hate networking and going out and doing stuff in person and all that kind of stuff, then I'm going to give you a LinkedIn policy. If you can stand that, and if you're good in person, which almost every single consultant that I've ever met is really good in person, like they're charming and engaging and they're just like great. And like the more you talk to them, you're like, you're smart. We should work together. If you are that, then the thing I think that happened with COVID and the thing that caused the rise of LinkedIn and that everybody got addicted to LinkedIn, it broke what is actually really much more important, and that is go into your local market and meet people. Because on LinkedIn, there's a million of us. In your local market, very often there's like you and maybe like 3 or 4 other people. But if I'm standing in front of you right now and we're talking about the thing and you identify my problem and you're like, dang, yeah, you're okay. Hey, you know what? Like, come see me on Monday. And then those companies tend to be the ones that they're like, oh, well, that's how much it costs. So in my experience doing that stuff, it was like I call that a grocery store. Because when I needed food today, I would go to a networking event or I would go speak somewhere and I would have a client within 2 weeks from that kind of thing. A garden is, you're going to have food eventually. Sometimes, some people can get clients immediately on LinkedIn, but usually it's going to you're going to have to kind of like you cultivate a following and you get people used to you and stuff like that. The thing that's in the middle is referral partners. And so really making sure you have people who know you, know what you do, and know how to talk about what you do, know what's a good referral for you. And what's really weird is some of those are going to be like people who serve the same audience as you, but don't compete. For example, for me, I have a colleague who's a business insurance guy and has referred a ton of business to me. I have a guy who has a marketing agency, and your agency people will know that they don't always do strategy. They make money on other stuff. So he didn't do strategy. So I would come in and do strategy for them. So great referral partner for me. Also, my mother, my husband, like people like that who just are out meeting people. You never know who they'll meet. They know, like my mother knows how to talk about what I do. My husband knows how to talk about what I do. So they can be like, oh, well, you should talk to Samantha. She could actually help you with that. So think expansively about those referral partners, and that strategic visibility is going to be the same thing with them. If sometimes there's people who are like too big to be on your email list, or you don't have an email list, figure out a way to get in front of them. Maybe that's, you meet somebody for coffee once a week and you just go through that list of your referral partners. Maybe you do the virtual coffees or whatever that's going to be. But strategic visibility with referrals and potential clients is going to be key for you.
When you get referral partners, maybe not your husband or your mom, but are you giving them a cut of the project or are you asking for a favor?
I give a cut, and that is really my comfort zone. I have colleagues in Australia and other parts of the world, and they were horrified at the thought of that. And I know other people who are like, they buy a really nice dinner for someone. To me, I don't want to have to count on reciprocity, and I don't want to feel indebted to someone. So, for example, the agency guy, I would send business back to him. The business insurance guy, I didn't meet people who needed maritime insurance. It just wasn't. So I will either say, I'll come in and do something for free for you, a complimentary whatever. I will make a donation to your favorite charity. I will buy, for example, again, the banks and the companies I've worked with where you can't send them money, I'll buy a pizza party for the whole office. You can get creative with it, but I feel best when I am energizing behavior that I want to see continue. I want to incentivize those referrals, and that's why I will pay. I pay 10%. And the other thing that I'll do is, instead of like a lump payment, I will, if it's retainer work, I'll send them money every single month, because when I come up on their Venmo, they're like, "Oh, her." it's a form of strategic visibility. So be a person who converts the referrals that you get. That's first of all. If I send you a referral and I've sent 3 and you haven't converted them, you don't get any more of my referrals. So
Right.
convert your freaking referrals. And then I think some kind of arrangement of reciprocity, whether that's money or I'll send referrals back to you, is important.
Yeah. Do you get it in writing? Is it pretty informal? Do you just tell them up front, I'll send you 10%? Like, how does it work?
I do it whether if you spontaneously sent me a referral and we hadn't discussed this, I would totally comp you. And I also have a little, just like a little 2-pager that it's possible it's in one of my my freebies that I could share, but I just have a ladies and gentlemen's agreement. ChatGPT could write this. Here's just like a 2-pager that says I'm going to do this. The reason it's a good thing to get in writing is because it's for either the first sale or our first year of work together. I think that's important because I'm not going to pay you forever. And I do have some clients who've said that there have been people who tried to get into referral agreements with them where it was on fees forever, and I'm like, no. After you've had the client for a year, I think you should own that client. Yeah. And so, but let's not assume. And so I put everything in writing in that little thing, and then we sign it. And especially, and this is a thing that I'd say again, especially with women, it's really important for us to have formalities around things like anything to do with money. Like, let's write this down. Let's not handshake. A lot of the women I've worked with have tended to barter. Don't barter. Send a check back and pay each other for the thing back and forth. Just like have crisp boundaries around those kinds of things.
Cool. Appreciate you sharing. I have my own opinions, but I'm curious on your take on the marketplaces, like the Catalans of the world, Top Towels, even the Upworks. Like, what are your thoughts on the marketplaces?
I think it's a little too much commodity pricing for my taste. I have seen people who got started that way with like a taster offer. So they'll do kind of like a starter thing, like a strategy session or something, and then turn that into something else. I want you to always be careful of what that first purchase is relative to that longer thing. So if there was a strategy session for even, let's say it was $500 for 90 minutes, if you want to sell me a thing that's $10,000 a month, make sure that doesn't feel like too big a gap. Your positioning price is important.
The challenge I've seen too is if you do the $500, even if you're trying to sell the 10,000, Catalan's going to do everything they can in their power to take their 25% of the 10,000.
Yeah.
Right. And so
they sure are.
Yeah. So they were like on all of I did one project on Catalan and they were on all of my calls. Like they had a rep of their team on my calls. I was like, get out of here. Like, but they got to take their cut. Right.
Yeah. Which I think is fair. So it's a medium for getting started. It's a medium for discovery. And, you'd have to work into your strategy how you have a complete stop to that thing. And then you're able to own that client.
Right. We're going to wrap up here in a few minutes. So what is one thing, if you can leave our listeners with anything, advice, a story, what would you leave them with?
The advice I want you to have to hear is you can have the business you want. If it doesn't feel like it, I want you to find people around you who are doing the thing. It's important for you to believe but can I work only 4 hours a day and still have a $500,000 business? Yes, you can. So think about what you want and get really clear on that and believe that is possible, because that'll really help you when you're so over busy that you don't have any time and still need to do sales and marketing, which to be honest, you don't want to do. You know what I mean? So we have to have so much stuff to motivate us because it can be difficult and lonely and all that. So that is the thing that I want you to know. And one of my funnest stories is one of my clients who came out of a big finance company. I forget what it was, but anyway, she was like a special projects person. And so she did all these trainings and nobody wanted to buy this training that she was selling. So when I met her, she had a training that was packaged. She was trying to sell to companies who were too small to appreciate what this is for $22,000. And it was like, the package was, she kept getting smaller and smaller. Like, how small can I make myself to actually get in the door? And I said, the problem is that nobody wants a training. So she had an appointment with a CEO of this pharma company, kind of like a startup pharma. And I said, awesome, here's your big opportunity. Don't mention training. Just talk about, like, find out what the pains are and go have. So she came back from the sales meeting with all the stuff she was supposed to have. And we reviewed it. And I was like, okay, so forget about training, but just think about their problem. And if money were no object, they were going to pay you something crazy. I don't know, like $100,000. What would you do for them? And then all the boxes went away and she designed this amazing offer of how she would do this and that and whatever. So I said, okay, cool. So what's the value to them? So I forget what it was, but they had like salespeople who didn't know how to sell and people getting promoted, and their sales were at the wazoo, but they couldn't keep up with the demand. And so money wasn't a big problem. And she felt like if she could help people get more skilled, then she could make them a lot of money. So whatever that lift was, approximately 10% of it was $1 million and something. And she was like, that's way too high. So I was like, well, what feels right? And she was like, I don't want to say 200,000. So I'm going to say $198,500. I was like, sure, whatever. So she put that in there, went into the proposal and sold that in. That the training that she did was it was in it, but it was only part of the total solution. So what I always say is, like, don't get stuck into but I sell this thing, no matter what that thing is. Like, think about, like, blow that whole thing up. If the client was going to pay you $100,000, even though some of my clients get paid $300,000, $400,000, $600,000 to do stuff, how would you deliver the solution that they're looking for?
I'll give you a minute to, like, self-promote. Like, what is it like to work with you? What do your packages look like, or anything you want to share about that?
I work with a handful of private clients. I have a group coaching program called The Path to 2 Million. And a good place to get started with me, I have a free thing on my website. It's called The Definitive Guide to Winning Six-Figure Clients, in which you'll read some of the stories, but you'll also hear the specific techniques that I'm advocating for selling six-figure engagements. And you can find that at samanthahartley.com/super.
Okay, cool. And we'll link it in the show notes and everything like
Thank
that. Yeah, otherwise, thanks so much for being on the show. It's great to have you and to share your insights with the listeners.
Thank you. Really good questions, Bradley.
Awesome. Thanks.